Stiamo per incontrare un international fashion designer che potrà raccontarci del rapporto tra i fotografi, la fotografia e il mondo della moda. Ma prima di andare avanti, ricordatevi di iscrivervi al canale cliccando qui sotto e soprattutto iscrivervi alla newsletter per essere sempre aggiornati su tutte le nostre iniziative, scrivendo a snaps.academy come vedete qui sotto. Buona visione.
Philip Waghorne, international fashion designer. Good evening.
Good evening.
And so what we want to ask you first is, what is the role of photography for you as a fashion designer? What's the connection, if there is a connection between fashion and photography for you?
Well, for me it's vital because it's part and parcel of the whole story. Today, publicity, for example, for a fashion brand is one of the most important things that exists, and it follows whatever happens with a fashion show, and that is then taken on and put into the hands of photographers, graphic designers, etc., etc. And that is, for me, one of the most important roles of the whole story.
Is there any particular photographer you've been cooperating with? I mean, that has been
yes, I do remember when I worked for Lanvin in Paris, we used a very famous photographer, David Seidner, who had a very special approach to the collection, and it was quite a contemporary approach actually, and very interesting to see what he did with those haute couture dresses. I do have to say that I worked with Mary Lanvin on those collections, and she wanted something that was different from everybody else, and so she approached David Seidner, and he took that collection and made it almost into contemporary artwork. Very interesting. I worked at Dior with Marquis Spar, who's another famous photographer, completely different, much more classic, but quite avant-garde. And Nina Ricci, I worked sometimes with David Hamilton, who also had a very different approach, a very soft, magical approach. So, you know, at the end of the day, when a fashion house makes a decision on who they want to create that special image, which goes out all over the world, it's never really the same. And actually, with the evolution of a brand, you change the photographer. It's important to do this so you don't remain static.
Okay, do you think that sometimes they might change somehow the design, the model, that the interpretation of photographer is important in the collection?
Yes, I have worked with also other photographers. I'm sorry, I don't want to mention her name, but because she, Nina Ricci, took my collection. She didn't understand at all what my collection, the theme was, but for the journalists it was quite obvious what the theme was. And she took my collection, which was totally English, almost Scottish, and she took it to Morocco to photograph with the shadows of palm trees and etc., etc., in a hot climate. And for me it just didn't work.
But it was used anyway.
It was used, but it was not one of the most amazing publicity campaigns, because it created confusion, and which is not what you want. I think that there are other photographers who I've known, even Helmut Newton, Guy Baudin, who had very strong points of view about taking clothes and photographing them. It was always done with a huge force, which actually made a little, perhaps a tailored suit into something really that goes down in fashion photography, in a fashion photography book. he takes the clothes, he puts that on a very special girl, and he creates a whole ambiente around it, a whole ambience, and it makes that little suit look absolutely amazing. That this, yes, I'm all for.
Did you ever take photographs yourself?
Sometimes I wanted to, because it's true, people like Karl Lagerfeld, they want to be behind the camera. Sometimes when I've done fashion shoots for catalogues or publicity, and I'm looking at the girl as she is, but I'm looking to her from the left. The photographer is going to take the photo from the right. So I'm looking from the left and thinking, this is absolutely perfect. In actual fact, he's not looking at the same thing as I am. And it's quite frustrating, and I can understand Karl Lagerfeld wanting to do that, because at one point it's your creation and you know how you want that photographed, but we can't do everything. So
You don't consider yourself a great photographer then?
I do, in a little way, when I used to travel a lot, because I love taking photos, and I did take some quite interesting photos in my travels all over the world. And I remember once in Tibet visiting a monastery, and suddenly there was an explosion of laughter, and these young monks came running down a staircase, and I was at the bottom of the staircase, and I just turned around and took the photos very quickly, because if you don't do that, it's gone. So it was a question of 10 seconds, and I managed to capture that. And another time in China at 5:30 in the morning, I couldn't sleep, so I went to the market, and I was crossing a bridge over the river. There was the sun coming up, and it made a trail of light on the river, and there was a man with a pirogue with a hat, and he is just right in the center of the path of light. So it's one of those moments that you can't really explain. It just happens, and it doesn't happen a lot. But yeah, I do love photography, and I think also not only for fashion, but for everything, for the whole meaning of life, because it captures certain moments which is wonderful if you keep them forever in your head and in your heart. But it's wonderful when that special magic moment happens and you capture it.
Right. And do you think that nowadays fashion campaigns and photography is different, I mean, from the one that you used, to know, like 20 years ago? What do you think about this change
that's been
taken by
yes,
digital, basically?
A huge revolution. And I think one of the most important things is this need for the identity of a brand, because today you have so many brands, they're all in competition, and you've got to excite the eye of the person who's looking at the image. It could be a woman who sees a Chanel suit, and we know what a Chanel suit stands for. If you continue showing that Chanel suit in a certain way, well, then it becomes boring. It becomes, the lady, she doesn't, the women, they don't want this anymore. They want to be stimulated, and they want to see that Chanel suit in a contemporary way of showing it, and I think it's normal. I think fashion has now become a huge business. It's completely changed. The whole outlook of fashion, the fabrics that we use, with new technologies, as you say, a lot of new technologies in the way that you can photograph a collection, the way you print it, etc., digital. It had a complete revolution, the whole thing, and it's good because you move on.
Yeah, sure. Don't you think that there's too many images, too many informations going around that confuse people and make the meaning of the image less important?
I think perhaps there is too much coverage. I think one of the saddest things for me is that when I started to work in Paris, when I was 21 years old, I started to work for Christian Dior. nobody knew anything about that collection until the moment that the first girl walked out through the grey draped curtains in Christian Dior Avenue Montaigne. And so it was all very exciting. It was private, it was secret. It was top secret work. And now I think it's such a pity that you can go onto internet and you can see every collection when it's just been shown. 1 minute after the show's finished, you can see the whole of the collection. You have close-ups. You can even see how the over-stitching is made, the details. And of course, I think this is quite sad because people who are not creators use this and they use it to make collections which are, you know, copies of a lot of hard work and a lot of creation that goes into it. I think this is very sad for me.
It's not exclusive anymore in a way.
No, and it becomes, even haute couture becomes a little bit cheap because the technique to make an haute couture collection is absolutely amazing. It's one of the things that I'll always remember all my life. To make that little black dress, the perfect little black dress, takes hours and hours and hours. And perhaps you take off at the end 0.5 centimetre of the length and it changes everything. I think when you have too much coverage, the côté précieux, that it's like a little jewel, is lost. I had the pleasure of working in fashion at a time, 70s, 80s, when it was a huge pleasure to work and to create. And I think we've lost this with quick fashion. Everything has got to be there on time. Everything goes too fast. And so you lose that anima, the soul of the thing somewhere.
So the photography they use now for fashion in these millions of brands have to be very, to impression very much. So probably the public, I mean the customers. So probably, do you think it will make a little bit more vulgar the whole world of photography and fashion?
Well, you know, for me, I've always thought of fashion really as being like politics. You can go to the left, but then you go back to the right, and then you go to another thing, and then you come back to the left, back to the right. And I think in fashion, I think there's going to be a huge, it's already started in my opinion, a huge going back to what were real values. Because young people, young designers, they don't know this period. They never lived in that period, and so it's all new for them. And I'm happy about this because a lot of the real values of fashion come from the past. It's not just what people are creating today that is the last amazing thing to be said. And I think that fashion has been built up over the years for centuries, based on something, and then it moves on, it moves on, it moves on. And I'm very happy because I say I'm retired now, but I don't feel retired at all because fashion is part of you and it's part of my life, it's part of me. But it's very interesting to see that certain things that I used to do when I started in Paris, certain styles of dresses, certain way of tailoring, young designers are using this. They're going back and they want it back. The same thing as prints on fabric, that people want to use real silk again because it has a different way of falling from crepe viscose. So I'm happy to see this because it's part of the evolution, and it's wonderful to think that I contributed something somewhere along the line to that.
So I think.